Correct.
Yep.
That is correct.
Correct.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. So
Right, I think we
yeah.
can start. Maybe just a brief introduction. This is our 10th Talent Cafe already, since 2020 when we restarted this back in May. So we're crossing over to the UK. Thank you, Ghitta, for joining us. If you've noticed, the surname Ghitta is actually an ex-Namibian. And she's consulting in the UK on mental health in the workplace. I've shared your LinkedIn profile with everybody, and I'm not very good with introductions.
Thank
so
you.
I'm not going to go through a lot of detail in introducing you to the team. And I would like to give you maximum time. So let me just say thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here today. It's very early for me. It's 9 o'clock here. I don't get up before 10. So you should know this is extremely special. I'm a night owl, so I only go to bed at 2 mostly. So a little bit about me. I'm, like Gun said, ex-Namibian, moved to the UK about 18 years ago. Worked in all sorts of other industries, ended up in construction somehow. And during my time in construction, I went through a horrible period of being bullied, being extremely anxious about the bullying, and my life just changed completely. My husband even said to me, "You're just not the person I know or used to know anymore. You've changed so much." And it wasn't until I eventually decided to resign that things started changing for me. Now, the worst part for me during all that was I fought for 4 years through the bullying, through the harassment and such from a colleague, actually 2 colleagues, and my manager, my direct manager. I went to HR throughout the process, and sorry to say, HR was useless. Absolutely useless. HR told me, if you can't handle it, maybe you should just resign. And I thought, what? You're supposed to help me. I'm going through bullying. I've got the proof that I'm being bullied. I've got evidence and people that can, you know, tell you that how much I've been bullied. And you tell me to resign, that would just be easier for everyone. And I couldn't believe it. And then I asked for another HR manager and another one. I went through 3 HR managers, including the head of HR, and all 3 told me, just resign. It's just easier, just leave. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to let them leave, make me leave. I love my job. I love the people. I'm going to stay. So I pursued for 4 years of what I would call hell. And in my mind, I thought, I'm strong. I can do this. Let me keep pushing. But in the meantime, I'm an extrovert, if you haven't seen that yet or can't tell. So in the meantime, I became a complete introvert. I didn't go out on team meetings anymore. I didn't go out on social drinks. I did absolutely nothing because, you know, it just changed me. I walked into work. I worked as hard as I can, as much as I do. I did extra long hours. I put in everything. I worked extra in the evenings. It just changed me completely. And eventually, 4 years on, I thought, I'm going to resign. That's it. And I resigned. And as I gave my letter to my direct manager, he said, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, hell yeah, I definitely want to do this. I've had it. And he's like, can you hold off another day? I'll take your letter from you tomorrow if you still want to do it, but sleep on it. I said, I've been sleeping on it for 4 years. I'm done. And he said, no, just hold off to tomorrow. And I said, look, nothing. Actually, there's one thing that will change my mind. And that is if she leaves and you leave, or I leave, that's it. And he's like, just wait till tomorrow. And I'm like, nope, take it, I'm done. And the rest of the day, it's like this weight off my shoulders, and I felt amazing. And all of a sudden it was the old Ghitta back, and I'm bubbly and happy, and it felt good. The next morning we had a meeting, and my boss turned up in this big meeting with literally everyone in the office, and he announced he's resigning. And I'm like, what? And he sort of looked at me like, are you sure you still want to do it? And I'm like, totally doing it. I had the best night's sleep last night. I'm actually free of you guys. I've got 30 days to work. I'm going to make the best of it. And then I'm done. I'm not changing my mind anymore. So as I left, before I left the 30 days, I noticed everyone in the office, the morale was down. There was arguments all the time. No one was really happy in this office. So with my skills as a therapist, because I was already a practicing therapist probably for about 5 years then, I decided I'm going to do deep relaxation sessions. I'm going to do stress management sessions in my own spare time over my lunch break and just try and build something a bit nicer for when I leave, then at least I'm leaving the office in a good state. So I started doing that. And within that month, the whole atmosphere just completely changed. It was amazing. So I did a stress management session once a week and a deep relaxation session once a week. I had 25, 30, 35. It just grew, people turning up. And eventually I had to start doing 2 sessions a day on a Wednesday because there were just too many people wanting to do it, especially the deep relaxation. Everyone loved it because they had half an hour to 45 minutes of lying down and sleeping, but they felt so much clear-headed, productive, everything else. So it was brilliant. And then my husband said, well, hang on a second. Now that you're leaving, do you know what you're going to do? Like, what's your next job? I said, I have no idea. He said, well, why don't you do this? I said, what do you mean? It's like, honestly, go into companies and do mental health. And I thought, brilliant idea. So I started with construction. I've done a few other companies like a cheese factory, which is really hard, I think, to breathe in. They're used to it. But yeah, accounting firms, all sorts. So my main focus is construction because I just had no support in construction. And I saw, especially the guys on site, the long hours, the constant pressure, they just don't have time out ever. So that's my passion. And yeah, this is why I go around doing what I do. I just love it. So I'm hoping to give you as HR a little bit of tips and advice so that you don't tell your staff member, just resign. It's better for all of us. It's the easy way out. So please don't do that. I need you to support these people. They really need you. And I'll explain to you why it will be beneficial for you, the organization, for them, the manager, everyone else. So you can all see my screen, right? Just a quick nod. Okay, brilliant. That was a longer introduction than I planned, but anyway, sorry.
I must admit, I'm finding it hard to imagine a bunch of construction guys lying down on the canteen floor with their hard hats and doing
amazing. If you go on my LinkedIn profile, you will see all these guys in their high vis lying down on the floor. I've got so many other photos on my website on more photos.
But I can actually, sorry, Ghitta.
Yes.
I can actually see that because I attended a mental health first aid course in the UK in January.
Brilliant.
Because I'm also very much passionate about mental health inclusion in the workplace, and that was the main reason why I attended it. And in the course, it was actually mentioned that there is, I think, every, I don't know how many minutes, there is a suicide in the UK. And the top of that is the construction industry.
At the very top, it's got the highest, the construction industry has actually got 2.8 times more than the average suicides in the UK, just in construction. It's insane. Every 3 months, 100 people in construction commit suicide in a 3-month period. It's a lot. That's just the UK, so I'm not sure what the rest is. But I've got, sadly, some shocking statistics for you about Namibia as well, so we'll get to that. It's quite shocking, but well done for doing the mental health first aid course, brilliant course. Now, everyone in the UK is doing the mental health first aid course, and people become mental health first aiders. There's 2 things about it. So first of all, I think every single person should do the first aid, a mental health first aid course for your own clarity. You'll understand mental health a little bit better. You'll understand the signs and the warning signs and the whatever else is out there. But the second thing for me is all the companies are creating mental health first aiders to help with mental health in the company, but there's a massive flaw to it. No one wants to speak to someone who's their colleague about their mental health. So these people aren't really getting the help they need. They're there and they've done the training, and it's expensive to do the training, but they never get used again, which you sort of need an outsider. I go on site and I do it what's called a therapy hour, although it's a lot longer than an hour. And people block me, say on a Thursday, I'm there from 4 till 7, and they've got half an hour slots, and they can just pop in, book me on the day, pop in, come and talk to me about whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be work related, but just whatever you're struggling with. And it's really interesting to see these hard construction workers that's in their 60s already, and they've never spoken to a therapist before, and all of a sudden they say, oh, I've got Crohn's disease and I don't know how to deal with it, and it's affecting my entire work. Or this is what my supervisor is doing, he doesn't understand, and where do I go with this? Or I'm going through a divorce, or this happened or that happened. And for the first time ever, they've got someone that's actually going to listen to them. But they won't go and sit with a mental health first aider that works with them, even if they don't know the person, because the site can be really big. They'd never go and sit with them and talk to them. So that's the flaw. But everyone needs to do it so that they understand their own mental health and can spot the signs in someone else. Okay, let's begin. Kun, this might be more than 40 minutes now. Okay, so a little bit of an introduction, just sort of what you can expect and everything else. I've got 2 screens, so sorry, and they're really wide screens. So if I look away, then it's just looking at all the bits and pieces. So when we deal with mental illness in the workplace, the role of the organization really is to assist the person that's going through that journey. The role of HR is then to facilitate this process and support managers to support their teams. And the role of the manager is to ensure that all these healthy work environments are created to help an employee who is struggling going through all of this, but also to ensure that manager is exercising self-care for themselves, having to deal with this employee. So there's quite a lot of roles where obviously HR would have to be involved in. So at the end of the session, you'll better understand mental health and mental illness. I hope so anyway. Take action when warning signs appear. Manage employees with mental health issues on a day-to-day basis. Learn about management practices that promote the performance and well-being of employees. Learn about risks and consequences of poor mental health in the workplace, and lastly, key statistics to take away. So this is what we're going to sort of try and squeeze into a nutshell for you. So if we look at shared responsibility, now some people might actually assume that mental health is an individual's responsibility, and it's got nothing to do with the actual workplace. And that's not necessarily the case. Although each employee is really responsible for themselves and their own well-being and their own work performance, the actual organization plays quite a large and essential role in creating a healthy workplace for their employees and to foster that well-being and productivity. And what is important is that a healthy workplace must reflect that sound management practices based on the ethical values on day-to-day operations in the company. So if we have a look at health, so health is defined as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. If we, oh, what happened to that block? Mental health exists where a person is in balance physically, psychologically, emotionally, economically, and spiritually. Being in good mental health means being generally satisfied with one's personal, family, social, and professional lives. And then lastly is mental health in the workplace. So that is expressed as a feeling of balance, satisfaction, and effectiveness in the work environment. I hope that sort of lays it out clearly for you what the 3 different parts is and where you would come into. Looking at this guy. So you are the HR manager and you're actually concerned about an employee's performance has maybe slipped, or maybe the health is worrying you. So the question is, should you take action? Answers? Yes, absolutely. You should take action. So as a manager, even an HR manager, you are not required to take charge of the employee in difficulty. You shouldn't either become their friend or their confidante. You shouldn't also try and diagnose them. We'll leave that up to the professionals. Your role is only to create a work environment that supports the employee's well-being and their performance. That's all you really need to do. However, you need to have early intervention. If you can do that early on, excuse me, it means that that worker may only be absent for a very short period of time. The longer you leave them and not intervene, the longer it will take them to recover. I know personally, my brother, for instance, went through a massive traumatic event, and it's about 6 years on now. He didn't get the help he needed. He didn't want my help, sadly. He thought it was a physical thing. And the more I told him it's a mental thing and he needs to get additional help, not just go on medication for all sorts of other stuff, the more he said, no, 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 it's physical, it's physical, it's physical. It took him 2 years to finally realize it is mental. But by then, it was such a long time frame that it's now 6 years on and he's still struggling. He's so much better and he's able to go back to work again, where for a long time he wasn't able to work. But if we only were able to do something, very, very early on, it wouldn't have lasted for 6 years. So the first thing you need to do as an HR manager is to assess the situation appropriately, to know how to recognize all the signs, the excessive stress that they might be going through, because normally when someone's struggling with excessive stress, it will be a forerunner for an actual mental illness. Now, there are risk factors, obviously. If you look at this guy on the tightrope, we're sort of all balancing on a high wire. And in good times, we are usually able to deal with all sorts of difficulties that comes our way. Now, when we feel a level of fatigue, and this is increasing more and more, or when we have to deal with internal or external stress factors, we are on this high rope being bashed by high winds, and we are at risk of losing our balance. Any questions so far? Nope. Okay. If you do, just drop it in the chat or jump in quickly, and I'll deal with it as it comes in. So there are quite a few threatening factors, physical and mental balance, and they sort of divided in 4 different categories. So first off is traumas. Now, this could be difficult circumstances that someone's going through, like bereavement, separation, divorce, involvement with a serious accident or an incident, illness like cancer or Crohn's disease, sexual assault, abuse, all of that would fall into traumas. Next up is genetic predispositions. So a family member might already have severe anxiety, severe depression. It doesn't mean a person will necessarily get it because of their mom or dad or whoever who's got it, but it does play a huge role. Next up is personal stress. Now, this is our internal attitudes, our perceptions, and all of that can increase our personal stress. Someone who's a perfectionist, for instance, will increase the stress in their own lives because they're trying to be so perfect. Difficulty taking care of yourself, or maybe you just don't know how to say no. Maybe you have social anxiety and you've got a lack of self-esteem. You might be having difficulty of letting go of things, so you're always mulling stuff in your mind and an excessive worrier, or you don't know how to delegate, so you just take on too many tasks at work because you just don't have those skills. And then lastly is occupational stress. Now, excessive stress at work can be caused by the following things: an excessive workload, involvement in traumatic or troubling situations. I have that not that often, thankfully, but on construction sites, because the suicides are so high, sadly, they will call me and say, look, we've just had a suicide on site and everyone is affected by it. Can you please come in and fix? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to fix. I want to prevent. You need to get me in regularly so that we don't get to this situation. Next reason for excessive stress could be lack of control over or knowledge of the tasks that they need to perform. Lack of recognition, and I see that all the time in construction. People are just not really valued, they're not recognized for the work they do. It makes it really, really hard, and it takes that mental impact. Lack of consistency between the values of the organization and their daily application. And then interpersonal or organizational conflict, including harassment, like what I've gone through basically. So, I mean, it's important to note as well that occupational stress is not actually caused solely by excessive demands though. It can also occur when an employee, you know, just don't have enough to do, or they've got a mundane job, the same thing over and over and over. So they feel unproductive and undervalued. But we'll talk more about all the symptoms later on. Next up is sort of the role of the individual that's struggling with it themselves. And I want to talk a little bit about stress versus mental illness. So excessive stress can obviously cause a mental illness, and the warning signs. So it's been proven that excessive stress can endanger your personal mental health. So it's important for everyone really to understand the symptoms and recognize it in the workplace. So a few signs to watch out for is unusual behavior. You need to know your team, and the manager needs to know their team. They need to understand what they like normally, and are things now different. Frequent or late arrivals or absences, all of a sudden, they've never had that before. Unusual performance difficulties. Uncharacteristic signs of distraction, concentration, memory problems. Excessively high or excessively low energy levels. Unusual inability to make decisions. Rapid mood swings, angry outbursts or weeping, crying. Strange or grandiose ideas. Marked loss of interest and desire to be involved. And lastly, signs that could point to substance abuse. These are all very, very clear signs. Now, when people are affected mentally, it affects them emotionally, physically, their behavior, their cognitive thinking. We don't always know what they're thinking, and we don't always know what they might be doing away from work. But these are clear signs you can start to pick up at work. I had a session on a construction site at the start of this year, and I was doing a deep relaxation session, and halfway through I could see this one guy is just not into it. He was very, very agitated throughout the whole session, and then all of a sudden he started crying silently, and he was trying to hide his face, and I couldn't stop the session in the middle because everyone's lying on the floor passed out. And afterwards, just as I finished, he got up and ran out the door, and I grabbed one of the guys I knew very well, and I said, look, who was X, Y, and Z lying there? And he said, oh, this person. I said, yes. I asked him, do you know him well? He said, yeah, actually he works with me. I see him every day. I said, is he okay? And he said, you know what? I've noticed very unusual behavior with him for the past 6 weeks. I'm like, oh my goodness, 6 weeks. You are telling me 6 weeks and no one's done anything about this. And he's like, yeah, but they weren't quite sure. Should they do something? Should they not do something? A week later, I found out this guy was booked off for stress, unable to cope. He's had all sorts of issues at home, but still coming into work, trying to work through it. And construction, as most of us know, is constant pressure. You've got no relief. And I was so upset because 6 weeks is a long time. This guy could have committed suicide if things were getting too much for him. And he's sitting in an office around people, noticing what's happening, but no one's spoken to him. Absolutely no one. And this is what I'm trying to educate people on. The moment you recognize these signs, you've got to step up. You've got to speak to them, because they won't necessarily come and speak to you. They've got this fear of, what if I lose my job? What if you think I'm weak? What if you think I can't do my job anymore? There's all sorts of things. And they might only go through this for a very short period of time, and then it's over and they can move on. But if they're not getting the help they need and the support, how are they meant to get on? So this is why it drags out, in my brother's case, for 6 years, because you're just not getting the right help. So the role of the organization, now there's a growing number of employees, employers, especially in the UK, that are implementing well-being policies and programs. And I'm hoping in Namibia as well. I have no idea. Kun did mention to me Namibia's idea of well-being is a gym membership and a blood test, basically, or blood pressure test. And I'm sort of wishing that's not the case, that there's a lot more to it. But if not, then maybe I can urge you to do a little bit more. Now, in the UK, the role that they've got.
Yeah, in the chat box.
Oh.
Most employers like saying you must be able to work under pressure. How do you determine if the pressure is too much? And I think the next question, will employees freely say that the pressure is too much? The answer is probably no.
Yeah, so lots of people can work under pressure. I'm someone who loves working under pressure because that's the only time I get something done. If Kun told me yesterday I'm doing this today, then I would have sparked and it's just sorted. He told me a few weeks ago, so then I do a little bit here and a little bit there, and then eventually I'm like, oh, now I need to do it. So some people like that pressure. Now there's a difference between good stress and bad stress. Good stress helps to propel us forward. It motivates us. It gives us that excitement to do something. We feel on top of the world, we can handle it, because that stress is actually really good for us. But then you have bad stress. And bad stress is, if I go back to the previous slide, when all these things start happening. When you start noticing these signs, then you know they can't handle the pressure. They won't tell you, and lots of people don't even notice that this is happening to themselves. They just think, you know what, I've always done it, I'll push, 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 and they push themselves towards burnout, breakdown, or fatigue, and then it's too late. So it's sort of up to the people around them to notice, hang on, there's something not right. There's things that's changing. You are angry all the time, or you started crying all the time, or all of a sudden you're turning up late every day and you can't handle it. I had a lady who just started turning up late. She wasn't sleeping well. There was all sorts of things. And it turned out her father had passed away and she was now the sole carer for her mother, but she's also just had a 6-month-old baby. So there's all sorts of things that went for her, and she had to go and cook for her mother every night and take care of her, put her in bed, and then go home and cook for her own family. And she was just shattered, and she comes to work and she just couldn't do it. And it wasn't until someone recognized that she needed the help and got me in to work with her, and I said, well, look, you need to give a timeout at work. Maybe allow her to come in at 10 o'clock in the morning and leave at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and reduce her hours for the time being until she's able to cope again. There's just stuff you need to put in place to help this person. Okay, going back to the role of the organization. So,
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
Ghitta. Sorry.
No, go for it.
Haley here. Thank you. I work for an amazing organization here in Namibia, and so we're like around 6,000 employees strong, and we have a dedicated wellness team, and these people, sometimes I wonder, like, if they're not kind of pulling on the shorter end of balancing, because I think there's something like, if there are even 10 people for 6,000, because it's a scarce skill in our country. And they actually like do these sessions, and they work with employees one-on-one who they can see are having a tough time, if someone has been referred to them. Now the challenge is that that often as human capital employees, we refer people to wellness.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't really, you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. So we're African, and it's men. Our environment is it's majority males, so that sort of thing is still something that doesn't really get attention. And then you make the effort of referring this person, and then you're like, no, they went to like 1 or 2 sessions, and then they said like, no, I'm fine. And then that's it. Then what do we do next?
So I'll be touching on it a little bit later as well, but it does happen sadly. Now there's a few reasons for this. Men in particular don't like to own up that they are struggling. Sadly so. Africans, I know for a fact, is very much, because it's so stigmatized, you know, it's seen as a weakness. You have to be always on top form, and none of us ever are. 17% of us at any given time is actually on top form, and the rest of us just isn't. And you're not going to stay at top form in any given time anyway. So it's really hard, because also when people are struggling with mental health, sometimes, which I'll touch base later on, the actual mental illness is stopping them from recognizing what's actually happening for them. They're losing track of time, they're losing track of sense of the world, so they can't even recognize in themselves that they are struggling. As an organization, first of all, like I said, your manager or someone need to spot the signs really, really early on to step in before it's too late. Secondly, well-being or mental health needs to be destigmatized. The mental illness, it has to be destigmatized, which means you have to create this culture where people talk about it all the time. They've got an open door policy. It's just, you know, a normal conversation thrown in, instead of having to have specific days like the World Health, Mental Health, World Mental Health Day next week. Don't just talk about mental health when there's a mental health day or something. It needs to be an everyday inclusion. One of the things I started doing with my corporations that I work with is all the managers, before they start a meeting, they start with a little breathing technique just to calm everyone down, relax them. Everyone seems just so much more at ease. They feel really calm and relaxed, so sparks aren't flying. And it just sets the tone in the office, in this meeting. At the very start of every meeting, it takes 1 minute to do. And it just changes everyone around them. So they brought this into every single meeting. And again, that's just talking about mental health and people getting to know that it's okay in the open space, that we can talk about mental health and we can do stuff towards it. So you can't do much, like you said, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink. The only thing you can do is to make sure that their work environment is set up for them to be able to cope, and that they are constantly aware that they've got support, that they've got someone they can maybe speak to if they need it, and that people are watching them in a way, you know. They're watching to see, are they deteriorating? Are there signs of more stress or unable to cope? And maybe make it clear to them, you know, if you're not going to get the help you need, there might be further steps that you as an organization have to consider. You can't carry them forever. You can do as much as you possibly can for as long as you can, but you're going to have some difficult conversations, I guess, at a stage as well, if they're really just not willing. But you've got to also support as much as you can. We'll get more to that a little bit later on, but Haley, I hope I've answered your question.
You have, thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll get to that. So the role of the organization, so looking at harassment, employee assistance programs. In the UK, we call them EAPs. I'm not sure if you have that in Namibia. Occupational health and safety, labor relations and staff relation representative programs, employment equity and diversity, and informal conflict management programs. So these are the main things that people do. Now, senior managers also have a role to play, and that is through communication and taking concrete action, and they can support managers in demonstrating the importance of well-being to employees in the workplace. Managers have to lead by example and show that they are, you know, open for mental health and well-being. Stress versus illness. So employees are who are showing signs of excessive stress or mental illness are responsible for seeking and obtaining that professional assistance. You can guide them again, but they are ultimately responsible for them. So ideally, employees should discuss any well-being or work performance issues with their manager or HR in order to find solutions. But To do that, their managers, HR, and the organization must have that culture of that open door policy and destigmatizing mental health, which is what I just said. You have to have the culture so that they feel this is actually normal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with me. We all go through mental health problems regardless. Well, put it this way, we all have mental health, regardless of whether we have a mental illness or not. We all have mental health. And obviously we want to prevent it going into a mental illness. You might have a mental health problem, but as long as we can intervene quickly, it might not go into that illness. So the link between stress and illness, and I wanted to show you a few different things. So it's scientifically proven that there is a clear relationship between stress and illness. So if you have a look at all the different things that can come from stress, asthma, heart disease, cancer, depression and anxiety, eczema and other skin disorders, colds and flu, stomach ulcers, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So all of these actually has a massive link with stress. Now, externally and internally generated stress can actually cause changes in our brain chemistry, which will ultimately imperil the immune system's ability to defend the body against bacteria and viral attacks, etc., which is, especially now with COVID-19, the most important thing we need. We can't be stressed out because it will affect our immune system. Now, the effect of all this excessive stress and the strain on the brain chemistry is experienced as mood. And usually that's depression, anxiety, anger, and it depends on the individual. They all have something different, you know. And even when such negative mood states do not produce an immune system deficiency, they're actually important in themselves because they associated with poor morale, absenteeism, and lower productivity. Now, I don't know if any of you, hopefully, I don't know, because it was a new word I had to learn. I don't know if any of you are aware of presenteeism, which is basically when you're present at work, but you're pretty much useless. You go to work every day, you do your stuff, but you're not productive. You're not nearly doing the stuff you used to do. So you're actually costing your company money. You go in every day, but don't really do anything. And that's another thing HR needs to always be watching out for, you know. Why is this person present but not productive? And is there something we can help them to do? Like that other lady who just needed a little bit more time to sleep in the morning and a little bit more time to go home early and go and cook 2 different meals. If she gets that support, then she'll be more productive in the hours that she's at work than when she just comes in every day and go through everything and she's just not present, really. Okay, moving on. So your role as a manager. So when you realize that an employee is showing 1 or more signs of that extreme list that I showed you, you must take action. Now, first of all, avoid assuming that these problems experienced by this employee will just resolve themselves over time. It's probably not going to happen. So you need to take action as quickly as possible, but without assuming responsibility for this person. So first of all, you need to meet with this person, excuse me, informally, and give them reassurances that this conversation that you're having with them will remain confidential. So inform them of your observations that you've seen about their behavior, about their mood, and just emphasize all of the facts. You know, use concrete examples, ask open-ended questions to them that will allow the employee to freely express their concerns. Next up is never try to obtain information about the employee's medical condition. That is private information. They're not obliged to share that with a manager. Obviously, HR might already have it on file. Now, if the person provides you with medical details spontaneously, then obviously this needs to be treated as confidential. Now, encourage the employee to get help. Like Haley's mentioned, you do. Tell the employee, you know, that you're concerned exercise discretion and judgment in suggesting, I don't know, the employee maybe contact an employee assistance program or a therapist or a counselor who can advise. Offer your help in maintaining the employee's well-being and work performance. Explore with the employee how you might temporarily adjust the employee's duties, their schedule, increase their motivation, or reduce their absenteeism so that they know what will be happening for them. And then do everything possible to address any prejudices concerning mental illness that may exist even in your team or in the manager's team. You know, for example, you could organize an information session on mental health and just encourage all the employees to attend well-being activities within the organization. Again, destigmatizing this whole idea of people being worried about mental health. Now, when illness does make things difficult, which is what I mentioned earlier, and employees who have not come to terms with their illness or who are prevented from doing so because of the very nature of their disability may not then take that adequate steps, you know, go to a therapist or get that help. And some forms of mental illness can impair that person's ability to assess their own situation and to realize their own concerns, which may in turn prevent them from dealing effectively with HR or management, you know, in finding reasonable accommodation for them. And like I said, that is the tricky part. You can do as much as you can, but no more. Mental illness is a definition. So I guess when you notice these signs and employees' performance is dropping, you've encouraged, you've intervened, you've tried everything, and nothing is working, what do you do then? And as with any other employee living with a disability, you then have a role to play in assisting him or her with their mental health problems so that they can maximize their potentially in a healthy work environment. But that's as much as you can do. If you look at mental illness, so it's characterized by changes in thinking, mood, or behavior associated with substantial distress and general dysfunction. Now, here's a whole long list of different things, excuse me, disorders that impair well-being and functioning of individuals. So I guess you've probably read the list already, but anxiety disorder, burnout, depression, PTSD, bipolar, schizophrenia, paranoia, and substance abuse. Now, with appropriate treatment, people who have a mental illness can actually successfully manage their own condition and they can lead a very productive life. But in order for this to happen, the illness must be detected and treated as quickly as possible. Again, early intervention is so important. And if you think about it, people spend time at work, pretty much what, 80% of their time? They're more with their colleagues than they are at home. So it's almost up to the colleagues to spot these signs and step forward and say, gosh, do you need help? Something's happening. So never underestimate your role in convincing your employees, your colleagues, or any other person around you to get help as soon as those first signs of distress are observed. So early intervention is, you know, the most important thing because it can help to prevent minor symptoms from growing to the point where they're just disabling. Any questions so far? No, moving on. We're nearly done, I think. So roles to play. So I've broken it down into 4 bits. So the role of the organization is to ensure policies and processes are available to managers to help them deal with mental health issues and help managers develop the skills they need to take appropriate action. And this is like someone mentioned, I think Yvonne mentioned, she went for the mental health first aid course, just learning and understanding more about signs and symptoms. Next up, the role of the person in difficulty. So they are responsible for taking care of themselves by following professional advice. Try to maintain their work performance by making sure, where necessary, of reasonable accommodations in consultation with their manager or HR. The role of mental health professionals is to maintain confidentiality so they can't share it with a company. They need to assess the well-being and moral and offer early intervention when required. And managers can consult with mental health professionals to help them address issues and generate recommendations for actions to improve well-being and moral. And then lastly, your role as manager or HR manager. So first off, it's really important to fully prepare in advance with a meeting with an employee struggling. And I'll go through the list just to help you get it ready. So first of all, you're not alone in dealing with a situation. You need to plan the meeting by tapping into all the expertise you have, your house services, employee assistance, labor relations, unions, if you need to get all the information you can possibly get before you go into a meeting with this person. These are, and if I say manager, it could be the direct manager of the team, so they need to be informed of this, or it could be you as an HR manager. Next up is take time to reflect on your own experiences with mental illness. You know, you must ask yourself certain questions before meeting with an employee. Ask yourself, are you comfortable dealing with this issue? Because maybe you've gone through a really hard time and you're actually struggling yourself, so someone else needs to take over and deal with the situation. Have you experienced mental health problems or helped someone close to you that was affected? And if so, what actually happened? What aspects worked well? You know, what didn't work? And what would you do differently the next time? And all these answers to these questions will help you to develop empathy that you will require when you have contact with this employee, so that this meeting will be a lot more effective for you. Next up is taking stock of your own prejudices concerning mental illness. So every one of us has prejudices. You simply need to just be aware of yours, so you can either curb them or set them aside to prevent having this negative impact on your employee. Next is to familiarize yourself with the organization's company policy. So speak to human resources if you're not in it, or the manager needs to speak to it, or you need to go through all the policies and accommodation provisions that's already set out. Have on hand a list of all the resources available to you in your organization, and maybe you even want to do additional research and see if there's someone externally that can be a resource as well. Make sure your conversation with the employee is completely confidential. You know, hold it in a closed office or just somewhere on neutral ground. They need to know it's going to be confidential, because it's so embarrassing for lots of people thinking that they're going through mental health problems. So mental illness can cause concentration and confusion problems. So the employee may choose to be accompanied by someone, a representative. I know surely when I went through my severe anxiety, I had someone to just support me. Sometimes I was sitting there trying to explain to HR what was going on, and then all of a sudden I would burst out crying hysterically, and I actually couldn't talk. And then this representative was stepping in, and because he knew the whole story and he could step in on my behalf. So offer that to the employee as well as having someone there for them. And then lastly, be prepared to respond to any reactions or even those objections that the employee may have. You know, that employee may appear reluctant to discuss the situation, especially if he or she has maybe previously witnessed some kind of discrimination against a person living with a mental illness. And if the employee seems, you know, a bit uneasy, find out exactly what can you do in order to increase his or her comfort level and confidence. You've got to have that first meeting, you know. It's like when I see clients as a therapist, the first session, unless they really bond with you, they're very skeptical and scared and worried, and they don't really, oh, sorry, that was loud. They don't really open up necessarily the first time. They need to get to know you better before they open up. So make it as comfortable for them as possible. What can managers do at work? Now, if I say managers, again, this could be the manager of the direct team or the HR manager. So there's a whole load of different things that you can do. First of all, managers should be trained. All of them need to understand the signs, the symptoms, what to look out for, you know, going through and just knowing what to spot. And as managers, you should really know your team very well as well, knowing when they're going through one of those, you know, issues that I listed earlier on when they're being different. Creating a culture of mental well-being is really, really important to keep health and well-being on the agenda all the time, not just, like I said, with a Mental Health Awareness Day. Good practice to create opportunities for conversations about well-being. You can have a lunch and learn. You basically need to normalize it as much as possible. If you can do that, it will mean more staff are likely to speak up about concerns or ask for help when they need the support. Next up, talk to the individual to understand how their mental health is affecting them. You know, don't get hung up about their specific condition. Everyone will have different difficulties and stuff that they're dealing with, different challenges, but the individual may know very well already what needs to happen, you know, how you can help, or maybe like that woman I explained, she just needed to leave earlier and come back later in the morning. She already knew that's what she needed. There's a clear business case as improved mental well-being is associated with reduced absence and better productivity. Next up is encourage movement. So exercise is the most important thing that you can do to fight mental ill health. So implement employee wellness schemes, you know, encourage your team members to get up and move throughout the day. Maybe, I know what I've done on the construction sites is I created a 1 minute at 1, a 10 at 10. I work with night shift and day shift. So 10 at 10 could be 10 in the morning or 10 in the evening. And it's different things that they do. So a 10 at 10 could be every morning for 10 minutes at 10 o'clock, we have a talk about well-being, whatever that may be, and you have a different topic every day. A 10 at 10 could be for 10 minutes, everyone is going to do star jumps and sit-ups and running through the office or whatever that may be. The one that works really well is the one at 1, exactly at 1 o'clock, everyone stops and they do a 1 minute plank, or they do a 1 minute wall sit. And it's just for 1 minute, but it encourages movements. People laugh at each other. It's fun. It's team bonding. It boosts the morale. So it's pretty good. I like doing things like that, and people love doing it when they actually get around to finally doing it. Manage workplace risks. You know, there's a well-researched set of factors that can contribute to poor mental well-being at work. And these are work demands, relationship problems, sense of control, role clarity, if they just don't know exactly what to do, communication, which I find is it's the most important thing. People don't communicate. Support and change. And as a manager, it's really important for you to understand and then manage all these workplace risk factors as far as you possibly can, so that you can reduce the likelihood of these factors contributing to mental illnesses at work. Next up is look out for changes in your colleagues. You've got to stay on top of it. So periods of poor mental well-being aren't always immediately obvious, but if you know your team, if you know your colleague, you'll start noticing small behaviors and start spotting them. You may notice someone become upset or withdrawn, like I was really, really withdrawn. You might get notice they are distracted, or they start to produce poor quality work or experience difficulties with relationships at work. Maybe they're argumentative with people all the time. So typically changes in mental well-being can result in physical, emotional, cognitive and behavioral signs, like I mentioned those 4 things before, and changes are prolonged or that are prolonged should or have a significant changes, you know, should prompt a conversation as soon as possible. Chill out zones. Now, I don't know if that's something you have in Namibia. We don't have it at all the companies, not at all. I'm trying to get that done. But the UK is pretty good with prayer rooms, because there's such a wide variety of different cultures, you know, a lot of Muslims as well, and they need to pray at certain times of the day. So during the rest of the day, this prayer room is then available to everyone else. If you feel like I've had enough, the pressure is too much, you can step aside and go and sit in this prayer room and just you know, close your eyes for 5 minutes or do a short meditation. I teach people loads of different short meditation techniques so that when they need that break, they can step out and go and do something and just go and chill. Google has sleeping pods, which is amazing. You should see them. So I wish we can all have sleeping pods, but that's not quite going to happen. And then lastly, like I've mentioned before, is destigmatize mental health. Managers must set an example, you know, have those open door policy, talk about it, recognize that mental health is a genuine problem, and get team members, or encourage them to talk about it all the time. Guys, I'm nearing the end. Sorry, two pages. I just realized it's 10 o'clock, so I don't want to keep you. I'm going to go really fast through this.
I'm sort of checking out and stuff. We are recording and I will upload it to YouTube. So if you have to, go, thank you for joining us. I will upload and I'll send the link.
Hopefully you don't leave yet, but I get it if you have to. 2 more pages, I'm nearly done. So I've just put this on the screen, all sorts of problems that can happen as a risk or consequence of mental health problems in the workplace. Next up is, this is the statistics that I wanted to share with you. So 1 in 4 of us every year will be affected with a mental health issue every year. And yet too often people are afraid to talk about their experiences because they think there is a stigma attached to mental health. They fear it will affect their jobs, their relationships, and everything else. And like I said, we all have mental health, whether we have a mental illness or not. So every single one of us will, at any given time, struggle with a mental health problem. And this is why it is actually quite normal. And 1 in 6 report experiencing a common mental health problem in any given week. So you might feel really anxious this week. Next week, someone might feel really depressed. That's 1 in 6. How many people are we on the call today? 21 people. That's already at least 3 or 4 of us on this call this week struggling with a mental health problem. That's quite a lot, you know, but this is how common it is. And in Namibia, this is the shocking statistics. We are the 4th highest, we have the 4th highest suicide rate in Africa. And I think that's really important to note. Next up, we're the 11th highest globally. I mean, how many countries are there in the world? I don't actually know, 200 and something? 287? We are 11. We are basically hitting the top 10. And that is not something to be proud of. You know, there's loads of other things we can be proud of being in the top 10 or top 20, whatever. Roughly 220 people commit suicide per year in Namibia. Now, it might not seem like a staggering number, especially if you're in the UK with 60 million people. But in Namibia, we don't have that many people. So 220 people dying every year of suicide, and loads of these are temporary problems. It can be prevented. 22.1 per 100,000 population compared to 11.4 per 100,000 population worldwide. That's double that we've got per 100,000 population. Now, Windhoek has got what, 200, 300,000 people? So that means 66 of them, if it's based on 300,000, 66 of them, just in Windhoek, in any given year, will commit suicide. I was talking to Koen about this the other day, and I said to him, in the last 20 years, I've had 11 people commit suicide that I personally know, and they're all in Namibia. All of them. I don't know anyone in the UK that's committed suicide that was close to me, none of my friends or anything, but in Namibia, 11 in 20 years, of which one of them was actually the first one 20 years ago, and the other 10 was in the last 7 years. 10 people in 7 years that I know. So it's quite shocking. And that's, I know it's probably not the best note to end it, but I want to make it, you know, I want you to recognize that this is preventable, and Namibia is high risk, and we should all stand together and help these people because we can. It's just noticing the signs and reaching out, because people won't reach out to you and ask for help, but you can reach out and offer help. You just need to see it. So that's me, guys. Just a quick break. Oh, and sorry, the other top 4 countries, Mozambique is number 1 in Africa, Tanzania is number 2, and Burundi number 3, with Namibia number 4. And that's the 4 in Africa. So these are all the workshops that I currently provide. I do these online and I do these face-to-face. If any of you are interested in any of my workshops, feel free to give me a shout, and we can have maybe a few people like we've done now on Zoom and do a workshop. Most of them are an hour in length.
Cool.
That's me.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much for...
It's a pleasure.
...knowledge with us today. I think everybody here knows and recognizes the problem, which is why they're here. And it's a case of preaching to the choir. I think I just want to maybe highlight just one thing before I sign off, to Hayley's question about the 4 or 5 wellness officers that has to look after, you know, 6,000 employees. The idea of secondary stress syndrome and the therapist for the therapist, you know, to make sure that as wellness officers we also look after our own mental health, and not try to, you know, kind of think that we don't have any issues either. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, you're welcome to ask.
I can see there's a few. I'm not sure if they want me to answer it now or if you're all ready to shoot and go back to your normal jobs, but
we normally allocate about an hour, so I'm gonna
okay.
upload to YouTube. But if there are any questions, you're welcome to stay on. If you have 5 or 10 more minutes, Ghitta, then I'm sure they'd appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, you can always privately email me